Welcome to the What If It's Not Depression podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Achina Stein. Today, we get to talk about stress. I know that's a heavy topic and it's a very broad topic, but we're going to narrow it down with Dr. Trupti Gokani. Dr. Trupti Gokani is an award-winning, board-certified neurologist, Ayurvedic expert, and mindset coach who blends ancient wisdom with modern science to help people transform stress and live in alignment. She's best known for her integrative approach to migraine and for creating the 3-brain optimization program, which helps high performers shift from survival mode to thriving. Her new book, The StressRx, draws on both neuroscience and Ayurveda to guide readers toward authentic health and purpose. Dr. Gokani has been featured on the Dr. Oz Show, Huffington Post, and has served as faculty for the Shift Network and Metagenics. Welcome, Dr. Gokani.
Thank you so much for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. And I know we've seen each other personally and talked about lots of different things, especially when it comes to our businesses. And you do amazing work. I'm really impressed with how far you've come with migraine, helping people with migraines. And so you were we had an incredible career as a neurologist.
Yeah.
I would love for you to talk about how did you pivot into Ayurveda? I mean, we're both from India originally,
Yeah.
from India, and obviously it makes sense that we would, incorporate that philosophy. And but I'd love to see how you incorporate it with the work that you're doing.
Yes. Thanks for asking. It's interesting because yes, we're both Indian of origin, yet I was born in Kampala, Uganda. I was born in Africa and
Mhm.
actually was brought over to the US. We were smuggled out of the country. I was smuggled out of the country. So I was brought over when I was less than a year old. And so I grew up in Chicago and I grew up very Western. Very
Mhm.
Western my thinking. In fact, my parents wanted me to make sure I fit in, only spoke, proper English. So I didn't grow up with Ayurveda, even though my father's a physician, very Western physician. It took me, honestly, until medical school, until I had my own crisis, where I woke up to this ancient science.
Mhm.
And I was very much following the Western kind of protocols in terms of my belief system and what I thought about health and how we manage health. And then I struggled with severe insomnia. My first year of med school was going to quit. And in that journey, I had seen my dad's really good friend who's a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist actually recommended I take Prozac and said that I had major depression, which I know that
Mhm.
aligns with your work. And in 10 minutes, he did the Siggy caps. Do you feel sad? Do you have insomnia? Do you have guilt, low energy, anhedonia? And asked those questions. And I said yes to, 6 of 8 of these because I wasn't sleeping. So
Right.
the overlap of lacking in sleep looks like depression, as we can say, with that
Yeah. Looks
very
like.
looks like. And you and I both know there's a lot more to that story
Right,
with your work
right.
on depression, right? And so the reality is that I didn't buy that. I
Mhm.
didn't buy that diagnosis. I was like, I'm not depressed.
Mhm.
I know my gut was speaking to me. I know if I could get this sleep under control, my moods would be fine. I
Mhm.
knew that at that young age in my 20s. And so I ripped up the prescription of Prozac that he gave me, went to the bookstore and found all of these ancient, readings. But the one that was most powerful was Ayurveda. I did love Bernie Siegel, Love Medicine and Miracles, Andrew Weil,
Right.
Spontaneous Healing. I read all these books and they're so different than, I was in my first year of med school, what I was
Right.
reading with histology anatomy. So that's how I found it. And so I found it for myself, which I think is the best way to find it in a time of need. And it served me so well that within a month, I was following some protocols. I was sleeping again. I
Mhm.
never took any prescriptions. And here I'm 54 years old and sleeping well. Just told you about how I slept last night. So I've been
Right.
sleeping really well. And I'm so grateful that I trusted my gut at that time.
Right, right. Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that you're Indian origin because that's so true for me as well. I mean, my family was my mother's side of the family is from Goa, and I came to this country when I was 2 years old. So I'm American. I grew up in
Yeah.
New Jersey. I'm a Jersey
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah. Same thing, right? Right. And so
So yeah, very
it's
important.
sad because we don't have those Indian, even though you think you're coming from Indian roots, it's not like we grew up with Ayurveda or Eastern medicine. We grew up
Exactly.
in a very Western way, right? And
Yep,
so
I did
it's,
too. Yep. Yeah, I did
yeah,
too. So it's so interesting. It just,
yeah,
even though you make these assumptions just based on names and,
right,
coloration and, just culture, but there's always going to be people who are from other parts of the world but may have ancestors from India, right?
right. And what's
Yes.
beautiful, though, I think about that is that I didn't have a model or a belief system that was imprinted upon me.
Mhm.
I showed up in that bookstore looking for some answers. We didn't, when I was 23, I'm 54 now, there was no internet, right, or social media. So it was the books, it
Right,
was the literature, it was those books in the self-help section that I went to.
right,
And it was like an exploration of a different world I didn't even know existed.
right,
It was
right.
actually really cool. And when I look back at how strange it was to
It
be
is.
such a, I'm just going to quit med school, yet find these resources. It was
Absolutely.
like, wow, this is a whole world I didn't know about. And Ayurveda is so fascinating to me. And we can definitely go into it if the listeners don't know about Ayurveda. I'm happy to share.
Absolutely. Yeah. Why don't you? Why
Yeah.
don't you just talk about what was it about Ayurveda
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that drew, what was different about it that drew you to it?
So at that point, mind you, I'd gone 3 months without sleeping. I had seen a therapist. And the therapist asked me if I was stressed. And this is the reason I wrote the book, The Stress RX, because she asked me, are you stressed? Mind you, I'm in my early 20s. This is 30 years ago. We didn't talk about stress like we do today. I
Mhm.
said no. You
Mhm.
know, I said no, I'm not stressed because to me, stress. I was doing well in medical school. I had a nice group of friends. My family was doing well. My health was good. It just logically didn't make sense for me to be stressed. So for me, I said no, I'm not stressed. She said
Mhm.
okay, and we did a couple like 1 or 2 sessions together, and she released me. She said you're not stressed. So go figure. I was a med student for sure. And so then followed up with the doctor, the psychiatrist, and it was interesting because what spoke to me when I started opening those books was the idea of getting to know yourself. It wasn't that you were being told this is what you have. It was, why do you think these symptoms are coming? What do you think the message is behind the symptoms? And in Ayurveda, that's all about Ayur means life, Veda is wisdom, the wisdom of life, the wisdom of longevity. Why do these symptoms come and what are they sharing with you about your state? And in Ayurveda, we're made up of 5 elements: air, space, fire, earth, and water. And we're born into one state, one nature or dosha, we call it DOSHA. So air and space element creates the vata, individual, personality. The fire and water creates the pitta, and the earth and water creates the kapha, personality or nature. And you're born in a state, and then this is what's fascinating in life because we don't know we're supposed to live in accordance to our nature. We choose foods and friends and situations and careers that pull us out of alignment with ourselves. And this book shared with me what I was choosing to eat and who I was spending time with and what I was doing that pulled me out of my baseline state that then gave me the symptoms of insomnia.
Mhm.
So, wow, that's what spoke to me because no one else was doing that. So it was so profound. And, at that point, I frankly had a 10-minute visit with a psychiatrist. He's my dad's best friend. I thought I was going to be sitting with him for hours. Like, oh, this is going to be a fascinating exploration of me, And
Right.
literally in 10 minutes, he's like, here's Prozac, you have depression. I thought, wait. So, it was also the system, which I know you practice in a very different way. It was the system that just didn't align with me, and I
Right.
wanted that deeper exploration, and this literature gave me that.
Yeah, it's interesting that you stayed with medicine despite right,
Right?
despite those experiences with the system that you were becoming a part of, right?
Right.
So it must have changed the way you practice from the very beginning, in many
Yeah.
ways. Yeah.
And it was challenging to continue medical school. And I had told myself, I remember my mom calling. She said, I'm grateful my parents paid for medical school for me. So my mom called me and she said, I have the tuition bill. Should I pay it? Because I was literally saying I'm quitting. Right.
Right.
And I said, you know what? If I pass my anatomy exam next week, I'll stay. Like it was just like a thing, and I passed the darn exam and here I am. But, it was funny because I was like, I worked this hard to get here, and then I was sleeping better and I was sleeping well again. I said, okay, whatever that whole thing was, now I know about the science. Yet it was hard to hide it. Like I knew it existed, yet I had to kind of put the Western medicine hat back on and stay focused on Western. But there was always that back of my mind, I'm going to go back to this. I'm going back to this. I'm going back when I can. And I eventually did my certification after I finished my neurology training. I went back, got certified in a couple of programs in Ayurveda, and I brought that into my practice.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. That's such a great story.
Oh.
Yeah. So, so what is stress really from
Yeah.
an Ayurvedic and neuroscience perspective? How do you define that from
Mm.
those two perspectives?
So before I'd written this second book, the first book I talk about adrenal fatigue. It was
Mm-hmm.
known as something you and I were very familiar with this idea of the adrenals
Mm-hmm.
going into excess capacity and then the adrenals kind of somewhat shutting down. And really, at the end of the day, it's more of a hypothalamic adrenal disconnect where when we're on all the time, and stress was defined at that time with that first book, the literature I was looking at was by Dr. Hans Selye, Hungarian endocrinologist, who defined the four stages of stress. And the idea being that I like his kind of simpler way of looking at this, which makes so much sense for all of us. When the demands placed upon the organism are more than the organism can handle.
Mm-hmm.
When the demands placed upon the organism are more than the organism can handle. That is that kind of like nice standard definition based on Dr. Hans Selye and his work of looking at stress and looking at the four stages of stress. Fast forward to like when I started doing more clinical work and looking at my patients, I found that 90% of my patients actually had what we called at that time adrenal fatigue. I did a little paper on that and realized, wow, all these individuals I'm seeing, they don't make enough cortisol. They're not able to create that cortisol to break those migraine attacks, to break the immune, challenges they were having. Thus, I was prescribing steroids and things like that. And I said, what is it that's stress really kind of, how does it define in Eastern medicine? And the easiest way to explain it is based on this concept of, we call it prakriti, your birth nature. Vikruti is your imbalanced state. Back to what we said earlier, if I'm born, let's say I'm a fire and water person, I'm the pitta,
Mm-hmm.
and both of the three types. The vata is the individual, typically smaller frame, typically moving, going, doing. They're kind of governed by movement energy. That air and space element keeps them on their toes, and their mind is very active,
Mm-hmm.
constantly thinking of different things, creative,
It's me.
brainstorming. Hello.
That's
Hello.
me.
And the beauty of the vata, if the vata is in balance, you're the most creative, you're artistic, you're spiritual, you're musical, you're somebody that can come up with all these different ideas. You love to say yes to things, you're engaged and involved. Vatas are fun to have at a party, always talking, always sharing thoughts and stories. Great energy,
Mm-hmm.
amazing when kept in that container of balance.
Right, right.
The pitta, I'll jump into that real quick. The pitta, which I'm more of a pitta, fire type, earth and water element. I'm sorry, earth and water, fire and water element. Fire allows you to see things. So pittas are more direct, more detailed, more organized, a little bit more kind of type A. You
Mm-hmm.
probably have some of that too, my friend. And pittas tend to be ones that they're very clear, very precise, organized. The thing about the pitta is that their fire energy, it gives them ability to see things that sometimes others can't see. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where pitta can get a little bit of an imbalanced state. The vata can move and go too much where they start to get the mind spinning and anxious. The pitta can get so heated they start to get hot-headed and angry and
Mm-hmm.
sharp with the words and sharp with the language. It
Mm-hmm.
takes a lot of energy to kind of keep that one into balance. The earth element, the kapha, earth and water, more grounded, bigger body frame. Pittas are more a little bit more competitive and muscular. Kaphas are more earthy, bigger body frame. And a little more introspective. They're not going to be at the party talking. They're kind of in the corner having one-on-one conversations. They love to be home on a Friday night reading a book. They don't need to be in lots of different situations. When they speak, they've been thinking a lot. So often what they say is very powerful because they've been really observing and listening. They're
Mm-hmm.
quieter, more introspective. They're kind of what we call the homemaker. Love to be in the kitchen, love to be cooking. So we got these three personalities. You're born into one of the three. You can be a combination. Usually you have a dominant one. Stress in Eastern medicine is a disconnect from your birth nature. Let's say I'm the pits at birth. Let's say I decide to start moving and going a lot and traveling a lot and being in cold climate and drinking cold foods. I'm going to get more vata imbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
The disconnect from my birth and where I am, that's stress.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it suddenly appeared to me, I was like, this is really a more profound way for I feel to describe it, looking at the 5,000 Eastern medicine science of Ayurveda. Because when we look at it that way, it's a disconnect from self, we then actually can use tools that make sense to bring us into harmony.
Right.
Like I know that if I'm a Vata imbalanced individual, I'm cold and moving and going, a cup of warm tea
Mm-hmm.
will bring me down because my hands will feel warmer, my neck drops a little bit, and we start to relax, you
Right.
know?
Well, I mean, what you're saying is that you need to know yourself,
Yeah.
right? What your resting state is, essentially your personality,
Hmm.
and when you get stressed, what's changing about you, and what can you do to
Right.
bring you back to that resting state again, right?
Right.
Which is that stress resiliency that
Hmm.
is important to do when you are addressing nervous system imbalances. Yeah, it's all connected. Yeah, it's the same
Absolutely.
science, but yeah, but I like the way that you put almost like a personality to it.
Hmm.
Describe three different kind of personalities, so to speak, and
Yeah.
and then how is that personality stressed? And
Hmm.
it's comes down to respecting yourself, really understanding your nature and respecting that, and not looking at it as a failure or a weakness, or like sometimes people think, like, what's wrong with me?
Right.
Why am I not able to do this? It's just like, that's just not part of your nature. It's not part of your, but you have other strengths. Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And
Absolutely.
it's knowing what your strengths or weaknesses are, and how to care for yourself, how to nurture yourself, and how to bring your back to a reset.
Absolutely. And we can shine when we're in that harmony, right?
Absolutely.
And yet once I read those books, I started realizing, gosh, I'm so vata, I'm so windy, excitable. And the wind pushed on the fire because wind, one state can actually activate the other.
Mm-hmm.
I started having problems not only falling asleep, but falling and staying asleep because that's a wind and fire combination.
Right.
And I realized, wow, let me stop the coffee, right? Let's stop kickboxing because kickboxing just only increases its movement energy.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I went to the thing I didn't want to do, which is yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Restorative, calm, quiet yoga, which was something at my early 20 some year old self did not want to do. I resisted that completely, yet it was what I needed the most because we resist what we need the most oftentimes. And that was the thing that really, with the other Ayurvedic principles, helped me tremendously,
Right, right. So, did you find that this way of approaching your patients reduced migraines as well?
tremendously.
Yeah.
And that's eventually why I closed the clinic because I was getting such beautiful results with using the model of I have a quiz on my website, so stress personality quiz. And what basically I have people do is first take the quiz, get to know what is your stress personality right now,
Mm-hmm.
not who are you at birth, because sometimes you just don't know until
Right.
you have to clear the space and clear the energy down to get into like who was I really at birth? What was my natural state of balance? What we're doing now is figuring out where are you imbalanced? Are you carrying too much fire, wind, or earth? Where are you now? And then what I realized is that headaches, think of it this way, the Vata windy, excitable individual is more likely to get tension headaches. Neck gets tight, body gets tight. You go into like a freeze state. When you think of fight, flight, or freeze,
Mm-hmm.
windy goes into freeze. So they often will complain of a lot of neck pain, a lot of tension. I used to do injectables like Botox and different types of injectables and trigger point injections, and they were so carrying so much tightness back here. It's a lot of
Right.
wind. They carry the world, weight of the world on your shoulders kind of idea. And
Right.
so what I realized is as I started to work with them on not only using, different prescriptions or injectables, but also using different foods and exercises for them, the wind energy came down, tension headaches came down. And then wind blows on fire, I was mentioning. So with migraine, it's a lot of fire, inflammatory. We know now with the migraine world, for those that have migraine, CGRP, calcitonin gene-related peptide, is the target peptide. All these pharma companies, we have six, seven, eight different products out there that block this peptide that, by the way, is made in the gut and then winds the brain up, moves you from a tension headache to like a migraine. And that is actually the pitta, fire state. And what's interesting is the eyes, behind the eye location with migraine, eyes allow you to see. So it's the organ of action connected to the fire state. And very
Mm-hmm.
often eye symptoms like red eyes, burning eyes, tear, it's linked to pitta, fire energy excess.
Mm-hmm.
And so migraines often are located right behind the eyes and in this area. And so when you kind of look at that state, and a lot of individuals responded by reducing the fire things in their life, be it the fiery boss or the fiery partner, or working with them in a way that reduced the fire input. Because when you're around someone that's fired up, you pick up that energy.
Mm-hmm.
And you carry that, as you know, right? We pick up. And if someone's really angry always around me, how am I going to communicate with that individual? What am I going to do to shift that? So there's all these different things. And the kapha earthy, that's the sinus headache, the
Mm-hmm.
congestive, heavy sinus type individual. So that person needs actually to move more. They should be doing that restorative kind of yoga I was talking about for the vata, they should be doing a vinyasa flow. Let's move. Going out for a little run. They should be
Mhm.
moving a little bit. So you actually can figure that piece out. And when I started doing that, migraines and headaches of all sorts started improving.
Mhm.
And it was great to like for something that seems so nebulous, like a headache,
Right. Right.
what is that? You can break it down into the three types. And I think that helped people tremendously, and
Right.
myself in having
Right.
protocols.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that person who has the middle one, the fire
Yeah. The fire.
headaches,
Hmm.
you gave examples of almost like a negative bias. So, as if the result was the cause was something more negative. But I wonder
Yeah.
if it still applies for someone who is go, 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 and they like how you were not feeling
Yeah.
stressed but
Yeah.
really stressed, go, 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 go,
Yeah.
go, even though
Yeah.
you're happy, getting things done,
Yeah.
right? Could it be the type of
Absolutely.
person too?
I mean, so many apps. I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, so many people that just love what they do. They love it. And I was actually at a charity event last night. This is an interesting thing. And this woman was chatting with me, and I mentioned the book, and she was asking how it's going, and she's like, "I'm such a fire." And same kind of example. She said, "I am so passionate
Mm-hmm.
about my volunteer work, about my charity, about what I'm doing. I almost forget what time of day it is because I'm so engrossed with my emails and putting plans together and putting ideas together. That is that intensity that like I can't stop. The intensity of the fire. Vata, Windy pick up and do a lot of different things. They're good at multitasking. Fire is more intense and driven and doesn't even recognize the hunger signal. And this is where I say this is where we can create imbalance because for as much as I told her you're loving your job, she told me she's having an autoimmune challenge. Okay.
Right,
She brought this up. And I said, well, your body's attacking itself. You're getting pro-inflammatory because your fire energy is too dialed up too high.
right,
So without you even taking the quiz, I can kind of guess what your answer is going to be. But I have a feeling that this is going to, maybe the wind is higher right now and pushing the fire. I don't know exactly, but your condition that you're taking now pharmaceutical medications for,
right,
sorry to say, it's coming from over here. And I love that you're passionate. I love you're doing amazing work. My goodness, we have so much work to do in this world. So much work to do in this world. Yet not to sacrifice the self.
right.
And that's where the challenge comes for most of us,
Yep, that's
right?
that's the challenge. That is
Pretty
the
much all of us, both of us.
challenge.
It's how
Right.
do we stay passionate, engaged, do the work that we know this world needs so much, yet how do we still? And so I've had challenges here. You know what I've said, because so fire, when it comes to time of the day, it's kind of fascinating. 10 to 2, I mean 10
Mm-hmm.
to 12 is probably the highest peak, but really it's 10 to 2 is the full window of Pitta. So
Mm-hmm.
10 a.m. to 2 p.m., with noon being its peak fire, is
Mm-hmm.
all of us were in a fire mode between 10 and 12 because the sun's at its peak.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So ideally, you want to pause at 12 and have lunch
Mm-hmm.
at 12. And I always ask individuals, do you get that hunger signal? Do you
Mm-hmm.
feel a little angst, like I'm feeling hungry? Because that's the hypothalamus talking to the
Right.
gut. And I have a lot of coaching clients I've worked with that just say, I just go right through. I don't even feel hungry. That to me is we're back to that adrenal fatigue, back to the adrenals dropping out. That's the number one issue is we've gotten disconnected.
Mm.
And what Ayurveda does and what it spoke to me about this science, and then I can go to the three brain model and into that a little bit, because it's not about I'm choosing, because it is not that I'm choosing to skip lunch. I want everyone to hear this. We're not choosing to become imbalanced at all.
Mhm.
We're being drawn in a different way. Our system is pulling us, and it is often subconscious. We don't even know we're doing it.
Right.
And that's why I try to bring conscious awareness to something that is happening subconsciously so we can become aware and then become conscious about it.
Right. You can't change something until you're aware of it, So once you're aware, then you can look at the benefits, risks, how it's affecting you and where you want to be in your life, and then make decisions based on that awareness. So it's really, really important to be aware of what's going on. So
Yeah.
how is this connected to your three brain model? Um,
Yeah.
terms of awareness, because that's you
Yeah.
said that it helps people break unconscious patterns.
Yeah, so this was kind of part two of the journey where I was, it
Mhm.
was great. I was seeing all these patients doing so well, after following some of these Ayurvedic protocols. And, it's ancient 5,000-year-old science. I was like, here, this is what the protocol says to do. Let's follow this. And patients got better, yet there were some that just kind of got stuck. They moved from, 12 migraines a month down to six, and then they stayed at the six, or some just didn't even move from the 12 at all. And I said, why are there some, I call them the super responders over here. They went from
Right,
like 12 to zero.
right.
Some got stuck at six and some just didn't budge. What's the difference? I started to really think, and pandemic hit.
Hmm.
I had time to think. So
Right, right.
I had time to think because I was doing a lot of traveling at that time, a lot of moving around and couldn't travel. So I said, let me just kind of go back and think about my patients and start to study the ones that were the super responders. So I did my own kind of internal, 15 years of clinical practice. Let me look at my patient base. And I noticed the ones that did really well were working on all three of their brains. And this may
Mhm.
sound shocking for people to say, wait a second, what three? I thought there was the one brain in your head, the central nervous system. And as a neurologist, I know this is a little bit of a different way to look at it. Yeah, I think it's really encompassing and more inclusive of our system. First brain, I really believe, is that central nervous system, the central operating center. It's helping us organize executive functioning, our day, our tasks, yet it's also organizing our thoughts and how we view the world.
Hmm.
So if something happens, an external event occurs, how do we process that? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it neutral? Most events are neutral, yet the reality is each of us has a different subconscious program
Hmm.
that allows us to look at an external event and have a story behind it. And often your story is going to be different than my story because we have different ways of looking at things.
Hmm.
And so we can just, think of it as it's that subconscious program inherited by parents and grandparents and kind of in our circuitry. And what we were told as a young child goes into our belief system and our attitudes, and we create that. So what I realized is that when I say people were working on their first brain, what I meant was if they came into the clinic and said something like this, and you probably heard this all the time, you know what, Dr. Stein, this medication is not going to work for me. I've taken so many medications, every single one gives me a side effect. It's
Hmm.
not going to work. That's a program. That's a belief system. And there's a reason why. Yes, there may be absolute truth to that.
Right.
Absolutely. Yet that belief system going into a new prescription that's coming your way is going to carry into the outcome of that. And we call that,
You'll automatically have side effects.
you're going
Exactly.
to. You're going
Yes.
to. And the reality is, then I dig in and I say, where did you get that belief system? We haven't even prescribed this medication for you. Where
Hmm.
did that come from? Let's dig into that. So when I had that pause of the pandemic, I actually got trained in NLP, neuro
Hmm.
linguistic programming, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And it's how it's it's really how successful people create success in their lives. What are they thinking? What internal language and external words are they using to create a reality that's amazing? And oftentimes we work against ourselves with our thought patterns. So first, Brandon did a lot of work on who were the individuals that were actually changing. And I, in my inadvertent, I didn't even know way, I was having them read Louise Hay and doing mantras and doing affirmations. I was having them change their first brain patterns.
Hmm.
But I didn't do it any organized way. I just was like, hey, you start thinking that way. Why don't you use this mantra or do this?
Right.
So I started to have people do that. So that was part one. Part two is the big piece that often gets missed, and you'll appreciate this as a psychiatrist. It's the emotional, the enteric nervous system.
Hmm.
We have 200 to 600 million neurons in the gut. And honestly, we make serotonin in the gut. All the neurotransmitters are made down there. The enteric nervous system is communicating with the third brain, the microbiome, 100
Right.
trillion bacteria. And what I realized is it's three parts. We kind of at some level have to work on all three. What I
Hmm.
mean by the second brain and working on that is if I have an episode, something that happens in my life, I lost my mom a few years ago. If I didn't process the emotions around that, if I didn't sit with my emotions of sadness around that, if I just moved right past into working mode and just ignored the fact that I lost my mom or my dog, who was very traumatizing to lose a dog, lose a pet, that was last year.
Yeah.
You if I didn't let the emotions come up and out and I have a way to process them, quite frankly, that enteric nervous system actually over the course of time can become imbalanced. We can start to repress our emotions. One of them's conscious, the other subconscious, and then it can create disease on its own. And we now have data to show that.
Hmm.
And of course, we know the third brain, the microbiome, the importance of balancing and keeping as much as we can the 100 trillion bacteria happy. So then we can break down carbohydrates and proteins. We can make the neurotransmitters. We can create the vitamins. So I realized that those that were working on all three brains, it seems like a lot, but they were doing little bits and pieces of all three. They not only responded well to medications, they oftentimes were like, I think I don't need it anymore, or I can reduce this, or I maybe can go down to just an abortive only as needed, not take the preventative anymore.
Right.
And that was the beauty of it. And
Hmm.
so that was the message. I was like, I've got to write about this because I don't think the people I'm hearing that I was in the circles with before were looking at it from a three brain, like, kind of focusing on one, two, or the other. Yet now I feel like someone's meditating all the time and they're not improving. Maybe, you're working on your first, but you haven't worked on your digestion. Or if you're
Right.
taking the supplements or taking the foods away, but you're not working on your mind,
Hmm.
I'd have to do top down, bottom up. I
Yeah,
wish it was just one
absolutely.
thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I just did a talk recently about nervous system reset, and
Hmm.
we talk about the vagus nerve and the amygdala, right? And I'm sure those are connected to your three brains as well.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
amygdala is in the subconscious is more kind of enteric nervous system. In fact, this is a fascinating little fact, interesting thing. The limbic brain up here, the temporal lobe, the limbic brain, where the amygdala is hanging out in that storing your emotions. It is, when you think of the enteric nervous system, it's a peripheral extension of your limbic brain.
Right.
So it's almost like your gut brain. These two are just holding the emotions, right? And the vagus, we love our vagus nerve. It's the connecting the gut and the brain, and it's giving that ability to go into a breath, go into a space of calm, connect and realize that we can move into parasympathetic state and,
Right.
and start to observe our patterns. And that's back to observation we are talking about before. Is the more we
Absolutely.
engage, right? Like you're doing, engage that vagus nerve, engage it, we can start to then reflect upon what our patterns are. You
Yeah.
know,
What percentage of migraines would you say is connected to this paradigm, or so to speak, these root causes? You
I
know,
think all of them,
all of
all of
them. Yeah.
them.
So, I mean, I find that many migraines have a root cause of like digestive issues, difficulty digesting foods. So they have food sensitivities and reactivities to foods,
Right.
and just fixing the digestion might improve that. But also, there's a hormonal component,
Yep.
estrogen dominance. And so
Yep.
I'm curious to know how your methods address, from a root standpoint, address
Yeah.
those two.
Yeah. You're speaking my language. Because so the first book, the reason I wrote it was my daughter was 5 at that time. Not at the time of writing the book, but at the time she started getting headaches. And she's 23 now. I was just starting to do food intolerance testing in the clinic
Mm-hmm.
and realized that my dear one had dairy, eggs, and gluten off the charts in terms of 4+ intolerances, and that's all she was eating. She was a 5-year-old going to birthday parties, having pizza and cake. And so I
Right.
realized, wow. And she was getting weekly headaches, I should say. So
Uh-huh.
I realized there was probably a link, and I took her off the foods. Headaches got better. She, of course, was very unhappy. Yet when the headaches went away, she stuck with it. And
Mhm.
then I ended up testing 500 patients and saw food intolerances and migraine very common. So part one, no question about it. There is definitely a gut connection. I think when you think about migraine, the diagnosis of migraine, nausea and vomiting, that's part of the diagnostic criteria. That
Right.
is gut imbalance. That's gastroparesis.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
exactly the gut is imbalanced. So it's not just during the migraine attack, my friends. It's in between the attack of migraine. You probably have some dysbiosis, some imbalanced gut bacteria. So step one is the gut is always involved. And Hippocrates
Mhm.
says all disease begins in the gut. I'm going with that. Yes, I believe that. So the second piece is the estrogen dominance piece, which kind of goes along with it. So if we are pro-inflammatory, let's say we're eating foods that are not really breaking down well, and we're having this kind of like this basal cytokine inflammatory gut that we don't feel in that
Mhm.
gut, oftentimes, unfortunately. Well, unfortunately, the adrenals are always kind of looking out for danger in the system. And that low level gut inflammation, the adrenal cortisol, may be a little higher than it needs to be to dampen the inflammation in the gut to keep us kind of in this basal, lower inflammatory state. So, unfortunately, we know that cholesterol is a precursor to all the hormones in the body. Cholesterol goes to pregnenolone. Pregnenolone goes to, on one side, goes to progesterone and then down to cortisol. If my gut is always stressed out, I'm going to be using progesterone to make cortisol, and there goes estrogen dominance occurring.
Right. Right.
So I tend to believe that all roads lead to stress because I feel like if we can, number one, reduce the inflammation in the gut, which can be done not just with removing the foods, yet by sitting and chewing and eating your meals at the right time each day.
Right.
So the food can be better processed, even if you have an inflammatory food. So I do agree that the gut is the origin, yet I think there's this piece of it that if we can add the calming the nervous system down, chewing well, sitting down to eat, and eating the right types of foods for your system,
Mhm.
then you can actually reduce intolerances and add spices. I'm big on spices to your foods, like to our Indian meals.
Right.
The taste should be in every meal. All the American food is sweet, sour, salty, but we've forgotten the bitter, pungent, astringent. And
Right.
I think if we can add that in, you think of kimchi, you think of sauerkraut, you think of like wasabi, if you
Yeah.
can enhance the digestive enzymes and hydrochloric acid, we can break foods down better. And I feel like there's so much more to that conversation. But yeah, I'm with you on that all.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you did a great job tying that all in because those are the two things that seem to stand out as root causes for migraines.
Yeah,
Um, and really putting it all the pieces together and addressing all
yeah,
of them, right? But you're right that, if you can bring down stress, digestion improves. So and the cortisol reduces as well, so that progesterone pops right back up,
right.
especially if you're not perimenopausal or menopausal. But sometimes people start having those symptoms, or they're more noticeable when they go into perimenopause and menopause, right? If you're a
Right.
woman.
You're exactly. But always want to emphasize, though, that there's a study that just showed that if you're stressed for 2 hours, just 2 hours, you can shift your microbiome to a
Hmm.
pathogenic bacterial state. Just 2 hours of holding on to something, holding on to anger, holding on to anxiety, feeling stressed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so powerful that, if we can shift and work on that piece of it, I'm not saying that I used to prescribe bioidentical hormones. I'm definitely open and a fan of doing natural based bioidentical hormones. I think it's important, though, to keep in mind that we don't want to just rely on pharmaceuticals and prescriptions of any sort. If we can change how we view things and how we process things and work on our emotions and work on our thought patterns, we can shift our microbiome. And we have that estrobolome, which is, metabolizing estrogens too, which could be part of
Right.
estrogen dominance. You
Absolutely.
could be imbalancing your estrobolome because of your stressful thoughts.
Right.
So, and that could then imbalance your estrogen ratio, progesterone
Right.
ratios, which then you're taking progesterone for, or doing whatever you need. So again, it's back to we can fix it over here, or we can be more holistic and take all these little pieces into account.
Exactly, exactly. Which is why addressing stress is a big part of it. A lot of times it's an afterthought for people. And
Yeah.
I've been spending a lot of time lately trying to get people to see, like, if you're under a lot of stress and you're not getting well,
Yeah.
it could be because the stress really needs to be prioritized. Like, you really need to make significant changes around the stress in order for everything else to work.
And I love that you said that because, and if you're giving progesterone, which I used to prescribe progesterone quite a bit, it'll convert to cortisol if your system is stressed out. We know for some people they respond so well to progesterone. I give them for menstrual migraine and then, oh my God, my migraines are gone. This is great. And then there was a month that goes by that it stopped working. I gained some weight and I felt like I'm, jacked up on the progesterone. It's because it's converting to cortisol. Because your mind, your body, your system is going to take that progesterone and convert it over to what it needs.
Right.
So even those hormones, just because we give a certain something, I'm giving you just estrogen, these hormones can move into different products. They can move into
Absolutely.
different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
And
which I try very hard not to give progesterone until a lot of the inflammatory states or issues that are creating a pro-inflammatory state are addressed first, because you're
yes,
absolutely right. Progesterone is just going to be converted to cortisol, which is why sometimes you see people on really high doses of progesterone and estradiol when they see people just for hormone therapy and nothing else. I don't prescribe those bioidentical hormones unless they're also working with someone or me to, address all the other issues first.
and that's the key. I
Yeah.
mean, that is so important that you brought that up because just going up on the dose. I've seen this with even the pharmaceuticals, like CGRP antagonists for migraine.
Mm-hmm.
People taking the preventative injection once a month and then not just taking the allocated 8 as needed, but then going up to like 18 as needed per month, in addition to the preventative, and just dosing everything up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could say the same thing for all these different injectables, the different medications that are out there. It's so important that everyone hears this. If you work on your mind a little bit and your gut, and you work on that piece, you won't be then having to escalate. And,
Mm-hmm.
you and I have been practicing a long time, 20 years, and I tell you,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
it.
30 years for me.
30, right? I
Yeah.
know, right? It's
Yeah.
amazing. But when you start to see that, you then realize you don't need to go so high on the pharmaceuticals and then get the side effects of the
Right. Right.
pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that's the core message of your book, the Stress RX,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Really address the stress first. So can you just talk about some practical ways to move from that stress place or survival mode into thrive mode?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. First step is number one, awareness. I'm big on
Mhm.
just like what happened to me and how I woke up to my reality. It's just being aware. Just,
Right.
that's why I do like that stress quiz on my website. Anyone's free, you can take it. It's just
Mhm.
get to know what your type is. Just know who you are. Get to know
Right.
yourself.
Yeah.
Socrates said an unexamined life is not worth living. So just get to know who you are. Most important person to know is yourself, not everybody else. Then once you get a sense, okay, I kind of run more that state.
Right.
Then it's really what can you shift? And generally, there's some really basic things people aren't doing. Number one, can we try to, as many nights of the week, get to bed by 10 p.m.?
Hmm.
Magical things happen. Again, 10, we talked about the 10 to 12,
Right.
10 to 2 window.
Right.
That's the pits of fire time at night. That's when your liver is cleansing.
Right.
So if you can get yourself into bed by 10 o'clock every single night would be
Mhm.
amazing. But even a few nights a week,
Right.
amazing things happen. Having lunch every single day. It's amazing how many people I speak with that don't sit and have lunch.
Right.
Those two principles honestly can take you so far if you're not doing them.
Right.
And then incorporating just something simple as a daily routine, a little bit of movement. And the movement could be a walk, it could be a few stretches, it could be just whatever you enjoy. It could be a little Tai Chi, whatever you enjoy, just to kind of move your physical body because we hold stress in our physical body. Neck and shoulders and hips, we hold a lot of stress. So just even moving a little bit every day, 5, 10 minutes, and then extra credit if we can get a little bit of breath work in. And the breath work doesn't have to be a long time. We could even do that with the movement. Hatha yoga, which I'm certified in hatha yoga, it's breath-based movement. So it's
Mhm.
like we breathe and we move at the same time. And just doing a few breath-based poses, folding forward and doing some breathing while you're moving. In between your busy workday, taking a
Right.
break and stretching,
Yep.
it is incredible. Those little things
Yeah.
every day add up to, I'm grateful as I'm 54. I'm still cycling. I have no hormone therapy, no medications, but because I do a little bit every day, and
Right.
my life is pretty crazy. I'm moving all
Mhm.
over. Yet I just intentionally try to do a few things every day
Right.
and
Right.
follow the rules whenever I can. So
Yeah,
hopefully that
it
helps.
really is. Even if it's a few minutes every hour, like if you have
Yeah.
a schedule where like we're seeing patients or you have meetings, in between those meetings, just move your body, stretching, breathing, even for it really could literally take a couple minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
little. That goes a long
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Well, it's been really great talking to you about this. I know I think you mentioned that you have a free cookbook that you
I
are
do. Yes.
offering our viewers, and we'll have a link for that in the show notes.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to think, and can you just tell everyone how they can contact you or get to see your quiz? Um,
Sure, yeah. Easiest way is
where would that be?
just easiest thing is going to the website, Trupti Gokani, TruptiGokanimd.com. That website is my name, and that website has you go in there, you'll see a click here for the quiz, and you can take the
Mhm.
quiz, and you'll get the results will pop up right away, and then you'll get like a little handout, and then the goal is increasing awareness. I feel like I was so grateful to stumble across this, my early
Mhm.
20s. I simply want people to know this is a 5,000-year-old science. It isn't going anywhere. If
Right.
anything, there's more requests to talk about it now than ever before because our healthcare system is crashing. So we really want to embrace it. And so the first step is like taking the quiz. Um, I do have a consultation form. I'm kind of on hold with doing consultations right now. I'm a little full for the next couple of months, but by all means, someone's to apply to work with me. We do group coaching. I'll probably be offering it probably
Mhm.
after holidays again.
Mhm.
And yeah, so just love to stay connected. And then the book is available there too. And the idea is, if we can learn this for ourselves, we can then teach this to everyone around us. And that is the thing that is I'm most grateful for. My kids and my family, whether
Right.
they like it or not, they are embracing Ayurveda because they are hearing me give them, gentle feedback on how things they can do with eating and lifestyle. And
Right.
it's so nice because I see so many people responding around me too. So
Yeah, that's great. Yes, it's great to see that when and the outcomes of your work, and it really helps you to continue putting your words out there and letting people know the great messages about what they can do and in terms of improving their body, their mind, their spirit.
Yeah.
especially around migraines. Thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Oh, thank you for all the work you do. Also, I'm so
Oh,
grateful to be in
thanks.
your space and to be in this community with you.
Yes, yeah, it was great meeting with you today. And I hope to see you in person again someday
Yes,
soon.
I hope
We're
so.
miles apart. You're hailing from Chicago. All
We
right.
will. All right, take care.